Leader Jeffries and Democratic Whip Clark, you're invited to the witness table. Leader Jeffries, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our ranking member, Jim McGovern, for the opportunity to testify before the Rules Committee on behalf of an amendment that Whip Catherine Clark and I are introducing that would extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years. Millions of working-class Americans all across this country are struggling from the high cost of living that exists in the United States of America. This country is too expensive. Now, Donald Trump and Republicans promised all throughout 2024 that costs were going to go down on day one. But costs aren't going down for the American people under Republican complete control of government. Costs are going up. Housing costs up. Grocery costs up. Electricity bills through the roof. And now, because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, tens of millions of Americans are about to experience dramatically increased premiums, co-pays, and deductibles. In some cases, everyday Americans, working-class Americans, middle-class Americans are going to see their premiums go up by $1,000 or $2,000 per month. We have an affordability crisis here in the United States of America, and Republicans continue to bury their heads in the sand. During the longest shutdown in American history, the Trump Republican shutdown, what we've seen repeatedly from our Republican colleagues who here in the House were on a taxpayer-funded vacation for more than 7 weeks, welcome back, is that Donald Trump has done everything but try to actually make life better for the American people. He somehow has found $40 billion to bail out his right-wing wannabe dictator buddy in Argentina, putting Argentina first, but not the American people first. And so Whip Clark and myself, on behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, believe that this amendment to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for tens of millions of hard-working American taxpayers is actually designed to put the American people first. And we're hopeful that our Republican colleagues will join us and abandon the reckless policies that you all have pursued in creating this Republican health care crisis, including but not limited to what Republicans did in your one big ugly bill, largest cut to Medicaid in American history, ripping health insurance away from at least 14 million people. Hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health clinics all across the country, including in rural America, are closing because of Republican policies. And now, because of the refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, tens of millions of people are going to suffer, will be unable to see a doctor when they need one in every single community in this country. And so we respectfully urge all of our colleagues to support this amendment to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits and support the American people. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Ms. Clark, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member McGovern, members of the committee. Thank you for having us. I am proud to co-sponsor Leader Jeffries' amendment and to be here in support of this urgent lifeline for the American people. To my Republican colleagues, welcome back. I don't know what you've been doing the last 54 days, but I hope you've spent some of that time talking to your neighbors, hearing from your constituents, and I hope you've heard the same stories that they have been conveying to us. I hope you realize just how anxious they are, how desperate they are as they scramble to figure out how they are going to afford health care under this Republican budget. And I hope you got a chance to hear from the people who traveled to the United States Capitol trying to secure meetings with their Republican members of Congress. Americans like the farmer I met, Ann, from Minnesota. She's a soybean farmer, already suffering from the market disaster caused by Republican tariffs. Then she found out her local hospital was closing because of the Medicaid cuts in your budget. And now you're going after her ACA coverage. And by the way, 1 in 4 out of our farmers get their health care coverage through the ACA. You have sent her premium skyrocketing, and I have heard this same story from small business owners, from gig workers, from parents, from people who live in your states. So what are we doing here today? You've already voted to dismantle Medicaid, the largest healthcare program in America, a program that covers 40% of all births in this country, 40% of children in this country, 40% of disabled people in this country. But you couldn't leave it there. Now you're going after the millions of families who get their coverage under the Affordable Care Act. And let's be clear about what that actually means, specifically to your own constituents. Let's take a couple making $88,000 a year. In each of your districts, that couple currently pays for Silver Plan $623 a month. It is by no means cheap. But here's what that couple will pay in 2026 if you vote yes on this budget. In Pendleton, New York, this couple will go from paying $623 to $1,160 per month. In Tifton, Georgia, they will pay $2,134 a month. In Greensboro, North Carolina, they will pay $2,300. In Rock Hill, South Carolina, they will pay $2,600. And in Fredericksburg, Texas, this middle-class couple will pay $3,000 every single month to get themselves some halfway decent health insurance. This budget will raise costs on people who voted for Donald Trump, people who believed him, who believed their Republican members of Congress when they promised to lower their cost of living. And instead, they're being asked to spend up to $3,000 a month for ACA coverage. That's $36,000 a year before their deductible, before their copays. What a betrayal of a straightforward promise. But this is not a given. This does not have to happen to the American people. This is a choice. Democrats have been presenting off-ramps all year. We've been giving you a chance to reverse course day after day. Well, here's another. Here's another chance to do right by the people you represent, who believe in you and voted for you. I urge you, for the sake of the American people, to make Leader Jeffries' amendment extending the ACA tax credit for 3 years in order, and bring it to the House floor for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to defer my questions until the end when I see how many things need to be corrected that are being said. Mr. McGovern, I'll recognize.
Well, I need to correct the record for some things that have been said, Madam Chair, with all due respect. First of all, with regard to the claims that my Republican friends can't vote for any amendments because somehow that will mean that the government shutdown will be prolonged. The Senate basically took a day and a half for them to do what they did. If we were to pass make any amendments in order in the Rules Committee, like getting rid of that slush fund for certain senators, the Senate Majority Leader Thune could call them back tonight. They say, be ready to vote tomorrow night. They could take care of that right away. So that's number one. Number two, my friends keep on talking about a democratic shutdown. I want, in case anyone's watching here, I want to make this very, very clear. And I'm going to make it clear to my Republican friends, you control everything. You control the White House, you control the House, you control the Senate. So Democrats did not shut the government down. Republicans did by refusing to negotiate. And the third thing I want to correct for the record is I got to be honest, I am shocked by the indifference that my Republican friends are showing towards the impact of not extending the ACA tax credits. It is stunning to me. I don't know whether you don't talk to your constituents, but if you do, people are getting bills where their premiums are skyrocketing. I mean, it's astronomical. And you knew about this well before the shutdown. You chose to do nothing. You chose to do nothing. You knew about it during the shutdown. You chose to do nothing, not even to want to sit down and negotiate. And now you know about it. I'm going to tell you right now, you refuse to act, you own this. You own this. And it's a cruel thing to do to the American people. Leader Jeffries, I want to get to the substance of your amendment, which I think is so important. But first, I want to ask you about something one of our Republican colleagues said in this hearing room just before you came in here. Earlier, I asked Chairman Cole a simple question. I said, do you think the House should have been here these last 8 weeks trying to pass appropriation bills? Because as you know, as appropriations chair, he still has not passed 9 out of 12 bills that need to pass by the end of the fiscal year, which was in September, by the way, to keep the government funding. So I pointed that out. And he gave this long, meandering non-answer. And he said something that stood out to me as odd. And it kind of shocked me, to be honest. And I went back and I looked at the transcript. And he said it was okay that we weren't here because, quote, there wasn't anything for us to do until the Senate acted, end quote. And I got to tell you, I'm shocked by that Republicans would say there wasn't anything for us to do. And can you talk about what the House should have been doing for the last 8 weeks on affordability, on health care, on grocery prices, on rent, on what looks like a war that might occur in the Caribbean, on the many things that people are looking for us to take action on? What would Democrats have done if we were in charge here?
Well, I thank the distinguished gentleman from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and it's an incredible question. It was a stunning answer. Given all of the problems that the American people are confronting right now, throughout the country, beginning with the affordability crisis, the cost of living in America is far too high. The American people throughout the country just made that clear last Tuesday across the country, that they want to see action. Yet, for 7+ weeks, House Republicans saw fit to be on a taxpayer-funded vacation, missing in action, part of the witness protection program, doing nothing to make life better for the American people. That's extraordinary. And you got to wonder whether this was an order that was given by Donald Trump, who apparently has said that he's got 2 jobs. He's both the president and the Speaker of the House. His words, not mine. Donald Trump apparently doesn't believe that there's an affordability crisis. Said it himself. There is no affordability crisis in the United States of America. That's what Donald Trump, the top Republican in this country, says. So I guess it's no small wonder that the Republican chairman of the Appropriations Committee would say that there's nothing to do. Because Republicans apparently don't think that there are problems in this country that should be dealt with, such that the House of Representatives should be in session. But as Democrats, our view is that we've got to lower the high cost of living. We've got to make life more affordable for everyday Americans who are suffering under crushing Republican policies. Costs haven't gone down. That was the day one promise. Costs have gone up. Inflation going in the wrong direction. Far too many people across this country working hard, playing by the rules, but cannot get ahead, are barely getting by, can't thrive, and can barely survive. This is in America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And Republicans have been out since September 19th. That's extraordinary. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Apparently, House Democrats are the only ones committed on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis to do the people's business. And our commitment remains to lower the high cost of living, to fix our broken healthcare system, starting by extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits to prevent tens of millions of people from experiencing unaffordable healthcare premiums skyrocketing through the roof that will either lead to medical bankruptcy or prevent them from being able to go see a doctor when they need one.
Well, if I could go back to the issue of healthcare, just for the record, I mean, has Speaker Johnson promised a vote to extend the ACA tax credits to either of you?
It's extraordinary that he hasn't indicated that there will be a vote one way or the other to address the Republican health care crisis. Now, our colleague from the great state of Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene, found it laughable that there's a Republican health care plan. She said she couldn't find it. She can't find it because it doesn't exist. Now, we know what the plan has been in the past. In terms of the Affordable Care Act, Republicans have tried to repeal it more than 70 times over the last 15 years. And so we are just trying to get our Republican colleagues to take yes for an answer. We've said repeatedly, let's find a bipartisan path forward. Let's reopen the government. Let's make life better for the American people. But let's address the health care crisis that our Republican colleagues have created, and we can start by extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
Has he talked to any of you about a pathway forward? I mean, has he engaged either of you on our leadership about how we might resolve this healthcare crisis?
Absolutely not. And it is astounding when we have 60% of American families telling us they have a hard time affording the basics for their families. This is about lowering people's costs, whether that's housing, groceries, utility bills, and affording health care. This should be something that Republicans should have come and negotiated with us, but they wouldn't do that. They showed so little regard for the American people. Not only did they make this extreme bargain where they took away their health care, Medicare, Medicaid, the ACA tax subsidies, medical research, all to pay for permanent tax cuts for the very wealthiest Americans. They couldn't even, while they were home, not doing their jobs, swear in a duly elected member of Congress because they would rather not do that than actually have to talk about the fact that they are shielding those in the Epstein files. The outrages and the disdain and arrogance that they look at the American people with is truly hard to take in.
I mean, I took the train down here today, and I got an earful from a lot of people on the train. And they're quite frankly puzzled at, like, the priorities of Washington right now. They don't understand, why billionaires and millionaires get tax cuts and the ACA tax credits can't be extended so that working families can afford their health care. They don't understand Donald Trump's obsession with redoing his bathroom in marble and gold and, building a Marie Antoinette, ballroom and demolishing the East Wing while they're struggling to afford groceries. I mean, well, bottom line is the president won't even acknowledge that food prices are going up. When's the last time he's ever been in a grocery store? He has no clue what he's talking about. You got to talk to real people. But there is a disconnect, and people are furious. And by the way, this is not about Democrat versus Republican or left versus right. This is now about top versus bottom. I mean, and people increasingly feel like they do not have a voice down here, that the leadership in this Congress and this White House, all they care about are people who are well off and well connected, who can write out big checks, and who can help enrich, the president and his family and those around him. And, that's corruption. That is corruption. I used to say during his first term that Donald Trump is the most corrupt U.S. president in recent history. This time around, I want to amend that statement to take out the word recent. This is unconscionable what's going on. And we ought to be able to come together and make sure people don't get screwed over on their health care. And I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Roy, you're recognized.
Notice the ranking member says that, quote, "we own this."
You do.
If we don't go down the road that is being suggested here before us, when in fact, the current situation with respect to health care exists entirely by record of vote and record of policies as a result of my Democrat colleagues putting forward the policies that the American people are having to live under. Entirely. They broke the system, and then they come here saying that we own it if we don't throw more subsidies, pour more diesel on the fire, to the fire that they started. That's what's happening right now. That's what for the American people to understand. Insurance companies.
Bail out Argentina.
Insurance companies, 1,032% stock prices up since 2010. 448% up from 2013. 85% of the revenues for insurers come from the federal government. What my Democratic colleagues are proposing is an insurance company enrichment scheme. It's literally what they're doing, is printing money in the Treasury and giving it to insurance companies. That's their solution for healthcare. Enriching insurance companies that are the very people that are telling the American people which care they can get and not get. There's no chance for an American to go to the doctor of his or her choice. There's no chance for them to go get care. There was no chance for my constituent who lives near Fredericksburg, Texas, to go to MD Anderson to get care because she's on Obamacare, which can't go to MD Anderson. And if the cancer that I had when I went to MD Anderson came back and I'm on Obamacare as a member of Congress, I couldn't go to MD Anderson because of the situation that my Democratic colleagues have put the American people in. Going around and preening that you're somehow caring for people more by giving them coverage for care that doesn't actually provide them care. While insurance companies get rich. $35 billion in subsidies in 2024 for people who didn't even use their plan. It's absolutely unconscionable. That is right. That is the correct word. It is unconscionable what we have done to the healthcare system, destroying it for the American people so that they can't get the care of their choice. That's what's happened. And now you hold the government hostage for 45 days and then try to come lecture Republicans about it when you've been holding the American people hostage to a broken healthcare system for 15 years. That's what's been going on. The fact is, Madam Chairman or Chairwoman, we are here today trying to proceed with, I think, reason, with 3 appropriations bills combined with a continuing resolution through January. After having tried with reason to fund the government through November 20th so that we could continue the debate on the various issues in question. But our Democrat colleagues refused to do it. And so now we've got the opportunity in front of us to extend, fund government at current levels, roughly flat, trying to stave off the inflation that is the direct consequence of the massive amount of government funding that has been going on by both sides of the aisle but heavily being promoted from my colleagues here on the other side of the aisle, who want us to throw another $1.5 trillion at it. That's literally what they were saying. It's not a solution. That's just printing more money while trying to go run campaign ads while you shut the government down for very clearly and obviously political purposes. I yield back, Madam Chairman.
Madam Chair, I wish the gentleman had that passion condemning the $40 billion bailout of Argentina, the right-wing cuckoo clock in Argentina. I wish he had the passion to condemn that.
Mr. McGovern and Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you. Leader Jeffries, we just heard a fairly passionate condemnation of the Affordable Care Act. You've been here a little longer than I have. Have our Republican colleagues ever been able to produce a plan that would provide the kind of coverage for Americans, affordable coverage, that the Affordable Care Act did?
You know, it's very interesting that my colleague from Texas wanted to sit there and lecture both Catherine Clark and I, but couldn't see fit to ask us a single question, engage in a debate. Where y'all been, bro? You've been out for 7 weeks. You don't have the time to have a back and forth? We hear you rant for a few minutes, basically threaten to repeal the Affordable Care Act and then don't want to defend that position? You should feel free to defend that position. You've done it 70 times. And if you think that's on the right side of the American people, then fine. That's your plan. Repeal and displace tens of millions of people. That's the Republican plan. And what I don't understand is why my colleague cut and run. I'm sitting right here. Catherine Clark is right here. Hopefully, Madam Chair, we can have a back and forth as opposed to just being lectured to by our Republican colleagues. But I thank the distinguished gentlelady from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who, by the way, another decisive win for the American people in Pennsylvania. Last Tuesday, it was extraordinary rebuke of the extremism that we've seen from our Republican colleagues and the absence of any plan to make life better for everyday Americans.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your prior remarks regarding what we could have been doing in the House over the last few months. I mean, the Senate's taken some votes on tariffs. Maybe we could have done something with respect to tariffs here. Except I think we have a rule that would prevent us from doing votes on tariffs.
Yeah, I thank the gentlelady for raising the tariff issue because there's so many parts of the parade of horribles that Republicans have unleashed on everyday Americans that I neglected to actually mention the tariffs. The Trump tariffs are causing costs on everyday Americans to increase by thousands of dollars per year. This is an affirmative effort to make life more expensive for the American people. My colleague from Texas, before he cut and run, he also said that, you know, we have a fiscally irresponsible situation in this country and that because Democrats want to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for everyday Americans, working class Americans, and middle class Americans, somehow that's problematic. You know what's problematic? The fact that Republicans, with the one big ugly bill, enacted the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, ripped health care away from millions of folks. In that same piece of legislation, cut $186 billion from SNAP, the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history, literally stole food from the mouths of hungry children, seniors, and veterans. And all of that was done to enact massive permanent tax breaks for GOP billionaire donors. And in the process, as if that wasn't bad enough, skyrocketed the debt by trillions of dollars more per year, saddling our children and our grandchildren and making it more complicated for them to experience the American dream in their future. So we are not going to be lectured by anyone on the other side of the aisle about fiscal responsibility when the bill that you just passed jammed down the throats of the American people in a partisan way because Donald Trump ordered you to do it, is the most fiscally irresponsible piece of legislation ever in this country's history.
Thank you. Whip Clerk, like you, when I've been in the district and not in DC at the hearings we've been having here, I've been meeting with constituents. Last week, I had an open house and a lunch for our federal workers. It was really interesting because I had 3 federal workers drive over an hour to my district from one of our Republican colleagues' districts because they'd been unable to have any kind of dialogue with him. I came into Congress during the first Trump shutdown, and what has been so remarkable this time around is hearing federal workers saying, yes, this is painful, but what is happening to our federal workforce, the cuts that are happening, the pain that is being inflicted on the workforce is so bad that we need you to hold out. We need you to make this situation better. So between the veterans at the parade I went to this morning in my district, who said, keep fighting, this is not working for my family, and the families who are sending me the comparisons between last year and this year's health insurance, and they were paying $1,600 a month, and now they're going to be paying $600 more a month for a family of 4. I mean, the individual stories are just astonishing. I assume you're having a similar experience.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing the American people into this. You know, I'm surprised to hear my colleague from Texas having a new interest in taking on insurance companies. Where have those discussions been? Where are the plans? Where's the answer to a witness who came and talked over the last 5 weeks to Mariah Plant from West Virginia, who told us about her brother who has special needs, who needs a lot of care, but who she is committed to keeping at home and being with people that he loves. Without Medicaid, she cannot care for him. He is a very medically complicated person, and she is so afraid of what is going to happen. And she, 29 years old, is also a small business owner while caring for her brother full-time. ACA is what gets her health insurance coverage. This plan, and let's not sell the Republicans short, they had a plan. Their plan was to come in, take $1 trillion out of Medicaid, trigger a $500 billion cut to Medicare, take away the ACA tax subsidies, and then cut medical research. So while we take it away from people in the immediate and now, we are also saying to the future, good luck. As one researcher who recently lost her lab due to federal funding cuts under the big ugly bill said to me, all the hopes of the patients I've been working with are now in a freezer. Now in a freezer. She said, I'll be okay. I'll be able to relocate, probably to Europe, to be able to continue her research. But that plan that they have is to take all of that funding and give it to the very wealthiest Americans in a permanent tax break. And they couldn't wait to get us back here. We had to come back on July 3rd to make sure that we did that in time. But we've sat here for 54 days without a single hearing, a single negotiation, a single offer, and the one most moderate of proposals to have a 1-year extension and a bipartisan commission to look at ways we can work on this system and make healthcare work for people, rejected, out of hand, and no comment. And I just want to say that it's a little hard to be lectured to about the pain that is being inflicted on the American people when we have heard nothing from our Republican colleagues as this administration saw their shutdown as an opportunity to fire another additional 4,000 plus federal workers to the 200,000 they have already let go, to threaten furloughed federal workers they might not get their pay after this shutdown concludes? Where was the outrage? And going on and lecturing our air traffic controllers that somehow they're not patriotic enough to be working without pay. And then we just go through the parade of horribles on the split screen. People so concerned. Their spouse may not be able to have the cancer treatment continue they need. They may not be able to manage their diabetes, get that inhaler that their child needs, and the continuing medical care to survive. And nothing as the president takes down the East Wing to build a ballroom, hosts a great Gatsby party with a burlesque show thrown in, $40 billion to bail out Argentina. And then we get to SNAP, where this president and the loyalists in Congress sat on their hands and made up excuses. Well, they took food away from hungry kids, seniors, veterans, disabled people, and said, we legally can't give this out. They knew that was not true then, and they have taken it all the way to the Supreme Court in order not to feed hungry kids. It went from let them eat cake to let them eat nothing. How dare you lecture us when you are willing to let hunger in this country be a political weapon?
Thank you. I will yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Scott,
Thank
you're
you.
recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And would you agree with me that the gross premium is set by the insurance carrier and doesn't have anything to do with the subsidy?
Who are you asking that question to?
Either one of you.
What
Gross premium.
what I'll say is that tens of millions of Americans are at risk right now of their premiums, copays, and deductibles dramatically increasing because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And these are people all across the country. In fact, in the 10 states that would be most impacted by the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, all 10 of them are run by Republicans.
Mr. Jeffries, if I may.
We're talking about West Virginia.
I'm going to reclaim my time. I wasn't trying to be smart with the question. I'm going to just read from KFF, which I think most of us who study healthcare use KFF. And by the way, I was an insurance broker for 20 years. I've got 4 professional designations in employee benefits. I don't have them anymore, but I had them when I was in business. And my degree is actually risk management and insurance. My father was a surgeon, so I actually saw all sides of it, and I live in rural America. And if you want to talk about rural health care, one of the key issues that we could fix is there are 425 hospitals in urban areas today that claim rural status. So when we put money out there for rural hospitals, the urban hospitals step in and they take that money. In 2017, there were 3. Today, there are 425. So there's a lot of gamesmanship in the system. But according to KFF, and we can get rid of PBMs, there are a lot of things. There's a lot of agreement on how to reduce the cost of health care that I'm baffled that 90% of the members of Congress would get rid of PBMs, and yet we can't get that passed and signed into law. But the gross premium, just for the American citizens watching, and I wasn't trying to ask a trick question, Mr. Jeffries, the gross premium is going up 26%. That is what the insurance companies on average are raising their premiums from 2025 to 2026. Now, certainly if the subsidies go away, you're going to see a bigger share of the premium. But the American citizens that are covered under the Affordable Care Act aren't paying the gross premium. They're paying the gross premium minus the subsidy. So there's, I mean, if we're honest, the biggest part of the rate increase is coming from the insurance companies going up 26%. Their costs didn't go up 26%. I don't want to get into a debate. I wasn't trying to be smart. I'm just telling you, if you want solutions, there's solutions, but the solution comes in two areas. One, dropping the cost of healthcare in the country by getting the middlemen like PBMs out. Two is you got to put competition back into the insurance industry, which means you're going to have to allow some smaller companies in that aren't big enough to do business nationwide. And you're going to have to give the American consumer the option to change plans and not be stuck with the plan they buy January 1. The thing I've never understood about what y'all did when y'all wrote the Affordable Care Act is when you buy your contract January 1, if it doesn't work for you, you got to stick with it for another 12 months. I mean, you should have any system that's going to work will have more insurance carriers with more competition and portability for the consumer so that they can move from carrier to carrier. We did it with no loss, no gain in the mid-90s. No loss, no gain was the provisions that we put in so that we stopped the carriers from games they were playing, if you would, however you want to put it. We stopped the carriers from doing a lot of things they were doing with no loss, no gain. There are a lot of things that can be done to fix it, but what you can't do is pretend that the Affordable Care Act works. It just doesn't. It's going to have to be rewritten.
Well, Representative Scott,
when you get serious about rewriting this, Jeffries, I promise you, there's a lot of us that'll work with you.
Well, I appreciate your observations, and I will say, listen, we agree on this side of the aisle that we need PBM reform. In fact, there was an agreement to engage in aggressive PBM reform until Donald Trump and Elon Musk killed that agreement.
It was actually
in
Mr.
December.
Musk.
Well, you know,
It's not elected.
It was actually Musk that was posted.
Well, whoever it was, Republicans apparently decided to pull the plug on that PBM reform, so we agree.
But Mr. Jeffries, you're from New York, correct?
That's right.
So I'm from Georgia. So I trust the Georgia state legislature to determine what our no loss, no gain, or pre-existing conditions clauses and portability options should be. And so that's one of the things as we go forward that we'll be pushing for is flexibility at the states. I'll yield. It's getting late, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Neguse, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Leader Jeffries and Whip Clark. And I think you've eloquently described the stakes for the American people with respect to the healthcare crisis that Republicans have created. I have a particular question about a different provision of the CR, but before I do, I don't know if you care to expound with respect to Representative Scott's questions or anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Representative Scott, raising the questions and giving us an opportunity to respond, unlike his prior colleague. And the thing that I would say is we agree there's a broken healthcare system in the United States of America, and we need to fix it. The problem that we confront right now is that tens of millions of Americans who are in open enrollment as we speak are going to see their health insurance premiums skyrocket to levels of unaffordability. That's the crisis that is immediately in front of us. These tax credits expire on December 31st of this year. And our Republican colleagues saw fit with great urgency to renew massive tax breaks for your billionaire donors on July 3rd of this year, while at the same time enacting the largest cut to Medicaid in American history and causing hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health centers, including in rural parts of Georgia and this country, to close. And that is why we believe this is a Republican health care crisis that needs to be decisively addressed with the fierce urgency of now.
And I couldn't agree more, Leader Jeffries. I want to talk about another provision that I described earlier as, I think, insidious. You and I, 4 years ago, Mr. McGovern, many of us were on the floor of the House on January 6th. There's a provision in this bill, this payday provision, for 8 Republican senators connected to January 6th, and I suspect you share the same outrage that I have about it. I wonder if you and Whip Clark might talk a bit about it.
Yeah, I'll yield to Whip Clark initially on it, and then we'll certainly have more to say.
This particular provision would be outrageous in the best of times. To say that we are going to use our appropriations process to put in specific personal payments to 8 specific senators in relation to an investigation? This is guaranteed money, as our colleague from Georgia pointed out. It is outrageous. And I heard our colleague, and I appreciated his comments and his candor about it. But what struck me was his reluctance to act in this moment. This is exactly the moment where we are not Democrats or Republicans, we're Americans who have identified something wrong, a payout in a bill when Americans are waving their hands and saying, we're not making it in this economy, we're not making it in this system. We have to hold ourselves accountable. And if we cannot reject and demand that that get out and proceed quickly with our work, then I would question what you think you're doing here. I don't think we have heard a single person try and muster any defense of this payout that was snuck into this bill. And the fact that at minimum we're going to pay U.S. sitting senators $8 million while we dismantle health care for people, while they can't afford to buy meat and coffee and groceries, they can't afford their electric bills. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing? We have to be able to say no to this. This is blatant corruption and payouts that were snuck in, and we have to do this now. There's no excuse in the world for not acting.
Thank the distinguished gentleman for that question. It's extraordinary. And, for the American people, it's important to understand. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar slush fund that is in this bill for 8 Republican senators who apparently believe they're part of the House of Lords, because that's something that would be done if you think you're a lord, not someone who is subject to the rule of law. That's extraordinary to me. And unfortunately, it appears that despite how outrageous this provision is, my Republican colleagues are prepared to vote for it here before the Rules Committee and tomorrow on the House floor, while at the same period of time can't find a dime to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans. It's shocking, and it speaks for itself. And the American people are going to reject. This is real-time corruption that's on full display. A multi-million-dollar slush fund for 8 Republican senators that every single House Republican is apparently prepared to sign off on. And if you vote for it, you own it.
Well said, Leader Jeffries. With that, I'll yield to the chairman, ranking member.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Scott cited KFF, and I just kind of did a little search here. He cited KFF as saying that there is a 26% increase in premiums. I just want to share what KFF said as to why rates are going up, and let me quote them. The amount insurers charge for ACA marketplace premiums is rising for several reasons, including but not limited to increasing hospital costs, the rising popularity of expensive GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic, and the threat of tariffs. These factors are similarly cited by insurers selling employer coverage. However, an additional factor driving up the amount insurers charge for ACA marketplace premiums is the expected expiration of the enhanced premium tax credit, end quote. I thank the gentleman.
I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back, and I now recognize myself for my time of questioning. I would refer everybody to my prior comments. We have to get the government back open. There are things that are not ideal in this bill. There are things that are highly suspect that were put in by the Senate. But if we try to fix it at this point in history, after 40-some days of a shutdown, we have no choice but to send it back to the Senate, and they will not be back until Monday. My people cannot suffer anymore. As I said before, my district has an average take-home pay of less than $51,000, and I'm 409th out of 435 in the nation. We don't need any more suffering. We can't take any more suffering. I have to vote to open the government back up, notwithstanding it's an imperfect process and notwithstanding there's things that I would like to vote to change. Because it has taken this long, we cannot wait any longer. And I yield back and now recognize Ms. Leisure-Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, Republicans keep saying, and placing, I think, what would be described as a false choice, which is what we just heard, that you cannot fund the government and extend the tax cuts. You cannot fund the government and remove that reprehensible provision, which I am calling a payola, and still move forward on funding the government. They have a choice. I have an amendment, and we will ask each of the Republicans on this committee, are you going to vote for millions and millions of dollars to go to those 8 senators and not a dime for enhanced tax credits for people's health insurance? And so I wanted to ask you, Hakeem, Leader Jeffries, also Hakeem, I wanted to ask you to, so.
I still go by Hakeem.
You still go by Hakeem. So is it possible, like they have the power to do this? Why is it that they think that they cannot act? Because this is something that is possible. So I'd love for you to talk about this choice that they keep providing us that says we can't do that, we can't do this, we can't do that. Why can't we vote to fund the government, vote to extend the tax credits, vote to remove that horrendous provision?
It is absolutely the case, and I thank the distinguished gentlelady from the great state of New Mexico for that question. It is absolutely the case that this corrupt provision can be removed and should be removed. It can be struck if the amendment is made in order here before the Rules Committee, the amendment that you are offering, the amendment that I know will be discussed and debated. No one can defend this provision. And in allowing it to happen, you know, it's bad enough that Donald Trump publicly proclaimed that he's got 2 titles, that he's the president and the Speaker of the House. But now the Republican-controlled House of Representatives wants to act subservient to the United States Senate. When I read the Constitution, we're separate and co-equal parts of the legislative branch. It's in Article 1. In fact, the House of Representatives is the first amongst equals, first institution mentioned in Article 1. And by the way, we've got the power of the purse. The House, we were given that power by the framers of the Constitution. The Senate wasn't. The Senate was given the confirmation power. And it's bad enough that we've already given away our authority to the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, who brags about him being the Speaker of the House. But now we're letting 8 senators conducting themselves like they're the House of Lords airdrop at the 11th hour this corrupt provision, and now our Republican colleagues are claiming there's nothing we can do about it? I mean, that's extraordinary. We've said in the House, and I'm proud to be part of the People's House, that we don't like to be jammed by the Senate on policy. And we should never be jammed by the Senate on policy. But now you're allowing the Senate to jam House Republicans to enrich themselves. I mean, that's unconscionable. That's unpatriotic. And that's un-American.
Thank you, Hakeem Jeffries. And, you know, earlier we also heard some of the representatives in this committee sort of attacked the Affordable Care Act. They contested Rep. Clark's. You're pointing out how important these subsidies are for Georgians and how their costs will increase. And if you look at the news articles coming out of Georgia, one of them from one of their WJBF says, marketplace enrollment in Georgia has doubled since the enhanced credits took effect. The Georgia Recorder headline says, expiration of the ACA tax credit spells disaster for rural Georgia. And the fact that the ACA and these tax cuts pushed enrollment to new highs. 24 million people, more people signed up. And these are the things that we're worried about. And when they attack the ACA, I think about, and they attack these tax credits, I think about the women. You pointed out some of those impacts. But think about the women who are going to be negatively impacted when they allow these tax credits to expire and when those Medicaid cuts go into effect. Rep. Clark, can you talk about what that means for American women and families if the Republican policies go into effect?
Thank you for the question, and I'm sure that your experience has been very much like mine. We were talking about the Kaiser Family Foundation numbers. On average, the ACA premiums are going up over $1,000, $1,026 in a monthly payment. And you think about the mom that I met at a food bank just a few days ago, and she had really narrowed what she was eating to a few crackers a day because she wanted to make sure that her children, when she was unsure that that SNAP benefit was coming, and she's already working 2 jobs as a single mom to keep food on her table, to keep the lights on, to try and keep a shelter, and trying to hide all of this from her kids so they can go to school and learn and not be anxious. That is hard. That is sacrifice. And we talked today about to veterans who said to me, fight on, fight on. To this morning in Arlington, Massachusetts. And we talked in our comments about veterans today about sacrifice and what it means to put it all on the line for your country. That is what we ask hardworking Americans to do all the time. Get up, work hard, and try and get ahead. And they are telling us this system doesn't work for us. I would join any one of my colleagues in working on overhauling our healthcare system. It wasn't working well for people before they took an axe to all of it and all of the supports. But when we're here on Veterans Day, talking about sacrifice and courage, if we cannot find the courage to at least speak out, and as the leader said, when we're not going to find a dime in this budget to give people health relief, when we are not going to talk about restoring the almost $200 billion cut to SNAP that was made before they politicized it as a weapon, we certainly owe those who don the uniform of our country to be able to stand up and say, we have identified a wrong in this budget in creating a personal fund for 8 select senators, millions of dollars that could flow to them. And we can't stand up and demand that we do better, then it's time to think of something else to do, if that's the kind of decision. Because what's hard is to be a single mom in this country and trying to make it, trying to get that little bit of breathing room. And we can certainly look them in the eye and say, we are fighting for you, and we are not going to stand for blatant corruption in this CR.
Thank you for fighting for the women of America and for all the families of America, wherever they happen to live, Republican or Democratic districts. And with that, if there is nothing else, as the last Democrat on the panel, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure Fernandez. Mr. Jack, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you to Leader Jeffries and Whip Clark for testifying before us today. I'm just curious, rewinding back to March of 2021, when these enhanced premium tax credits were created, could you walk us through, in this committee, through the thought process as to why they were set to expire at the end of this year?
Well, actually, we'll correct the gentleman's time frame because, as you probably recall, the original Affordable Care Act tax credits were part of the American Rescue Plan. That lapsed at the end of December in 2022. As part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was enacted in 2022, that extended the Affordable Care Act tax credits for an additional 3 years, which is why the amendment that we're offering today would extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years under current policy baseline. That's been the Republican policy. In fact, you all just use current policy baseline to jam the one big ugly bill down the throats of the American people. Current policy baseline where you ripped Medicaid away from 14 million Americans. Current policy baseline where you enacted the largest cut to SNAP in American history. And most egregiously, current policy baseline as part of your one big ugly bill to provide massive tax breaks for your billionaire donors. And you made it permanent. And now, what we've seen over the last several weeks is the Republican refusal to even extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for working class Americans for a year. So that's why we're in the situation that we're in. And Republicans continue to refuse to take yes for an answer. We're trying to help you help your own folks, because the states that will be most impacted if the Affordable Care Act tax credits expire: West Virginia, Wyoming, Alaska, Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, South Carolina, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Those are the top 10 states impacted if the Affordable Care Act tax credits expire. So this is not a partisan issue for us as House Democrats. It's a patriotic issue because we're fighting to protect the health care of everyday Americans, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. You're a hardworking American taxpayer, and you can't afford to have your health insurance premiums skyrocket by thousands of dollars a year.
Thank you for that. And a question I have, you mentioned things should be bipartisan issues. I'm curious, this bill before us is a bipartisan bill. 8 Democrat senators crossed the aisle to send it over to the House. I'm curious, what's your message to those 8 Democrat senators who bravely crossed the aisle to send this bill to us?
Our message, our fight right now is that there are at least 25 different House Republicans, because we're in the House of Representatives right now, 25 House Republicans who in different ways have said, yeah, we need to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And now is the opportunity for members of the House Republican Conference to actually mean what they say. And we're giving them this opportunity. If you make this amendment in order, let's debate it on the House floor. My friends on the other side of the aisle have been literally gone for 7+ weeks. We should have ample opportunity, and I appreciate, Madam Chair, you giving us the opportunity to testify here today. The distinguished gentle lady from the great state of North Carolina by way of Brooklyn, the Bronx.
Manhattan. In there.
We get them all in. But let's debate these issues. We've been saying it week after week after week. We'll find a bipartisan path forward. Let's reopen the government, but let's do it in a way that addresses decisively the Republican health care crisis.
Thank you. I'll yield to my colleague and friend, Mr. Roy, before I yield back to the chair.
I'll take my friend from Georgia. I know I had to step out on my shoulder a little bit ago, so I stepped out. I think my name was invoked a couple times. That's fine. We do that around here in response, and I made some statements. I just wanted to stipulate the record a couple things. One, I wanted to ask consent to enter the record the editorial board of the Washington Post for November 1st, which they go through an outline. This is an editorial board that-
Without objection.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, that had commented that the Affordable Care Act has been anything but affordable. And in going through the analysis in this editorial, I won't go through the whole thing here for the sake of time, but it's making the case for how we got here and walking through the whole process in terms of the mandate and then in terms of sort of a backdoor into it through the subsidies with the 400% POP, which we've already talked about earlier. We then went from the 15% rate, which is historic for private plans and was true for Obamacare, and now we're at a 35 to 40% rate in terms of these plans that were not being used, yet massively subsidized. So as the editorial points out, the late economist Milton Friedman has said nothing is as permanent as a temporary government program. And that's what I think needs to be stipulated here, is that this was put forward as a temporary program during COVID and is being asked to be extended to do the work of trying to basically put a Band-Aid on it, to use the Washington Post terms. As they say, quote, the solution offered by Democratic leaders is to keep shoveling more taxpayer money into a pit of ever larger subsidies, even though the national debt is $38 trillion and growing. That is the Washington Post editorial board. And I would just close by saying we have significant solutions to health care that we have been putting forward and proposing, from any number of possibilities involving expansion of health savings accounts, direct primary care. We had provisions of direct primary care that we put in the big, beautiful bill, which I believe will have serious benefits, being able to use insurance for direct primary care. I've got direct primary care doctors throughout my district, which are helping people, helping musicians, helping people that can't get access to doctors through their insurance companies, the ability to be able to have greater transparency and be able to go to places like the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, where you can get a $14,000 knee replacement instead of $65,000 through the insurance plans, being able to have expansive use of things like MediShare and health sharing ministries that allow people to defray costs. We've got lots of people coming up with creative solutions to be able to afford health care, because right now they're denied the ability to afford health care because we broke the system after World War II, wage controls, and then we had this employer-foisted product that is now making it impossible for people to afford care. And what we ought to do is eliminate that tax disparity. We ought to make it to where you have same tax treatment, whether you're getting it from your employer or whether you have it yourself. If your employer wants to give it to you, you should go to a health savings account. You should be able to go to the market and shop. And you ought to have varied solutions, including short-term limited duration plans, which we should bring back, and other ways in order to get costs down so you have more competition. There are lots of ways we can address this if we'll sit and debate it. But what we shouldn't be doing is demanding that in order to proceed, as we've gone forward with short-term CRs and now 3 appropriations bills to keep government going and moving forward, we should debate those in a full open debate on healthcare. Happy to do that anytime. But I don't think it needs to be done in the context of offering an amendment here to do, as I said, the Washington Post said, the solution is to keep shoveling more taxpayer money into a pit of ever larger subsidies, even though the national debt is $38 trillion, and which, by the way, will continue to drive the cost of health care up. I yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
And I yield back to the chairwoman.
Thank you very much. I'm going to follow on with that, but I do want to set the record straight just a bit. Wikipedia is wrong. I was born in Manhattan.
All right.
I was baptized at Mount Carmel Church. My grandparents moved to the Bronx, and I spent some time with them. So my mother, though, was living in Brooklyn when she met my father there. So I do have most of the boroughs covered.
That's a beautiful thing. But you strike me as someone from the boogie down Bronx.
I took the train at Pelham Bay, walked through the park in the days when you could walk through the Pelham Bay Park and get on the subway. Anyway, I want to follow on with what my colleague from Texas was talking about from the Washington Post. The Affordable Care Act is really a misnomer. It's never been affordable, as the Washington Post said. It's just never. And let's be clear, the ACA subsidies will still be present in the individual market next year, despite all the things you all have been saying. The enhanced premium subsidies, which go directly to insurance companies and were justified as COVID relief when they were authorized, are expiring because Democrats insisted on a take it or leave it, no reforms approach. COVID is over. Democrats themselves were responsible for sunsetting these provisions, are responsible for setting up the sunsetting of these provisions at the end of December 2025. Republicans had nothing to do. We never voted for the Affordable Care Act. Yes, we voted to repeal it 70 times. We always had an alternative to it. We've heard over and over tonight that there were no alternatives. That is not true. Much of what has been said tonight is not true. We'll deal some more with that tomorrow. But we should not be rewarding our colleagues for taking the entire government hostage by rubber stamping a COVID-related program. COVID is over. Our Democrat colleagues would have the public believe that the only way to stabilize the individual insurance market is to flood it with subsidies. But again, we have a long history of offering market reforms like associated health plans, which have been you've fought against tooth and nail. We've supported HSAs, which you've fought against tooth and nail. You never seem to want the American people to have any control over their health care. It's always forcing people into government-controlled health care.
Would the gentlelady mind yielding just for a moment?
But
Not for an entire back and forth. I just wanted to ask a question. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and Donald Trump has taken a my way or the highway approach from the very beginning of his time in office. And so I'm just wondering why Republicans haven't seen fit. We can agree, we have a broken healthcare system. We as Democrats want to fix it. But throughout the entirety of this year, unless I'm missing something, where's the Republican action on addressing the health care of the American people other than ripping Medicaid away from 14 million folks?
Well, I wasn't going to address every point you made. I said that earlier. But we did not rip away Medicaid from a single soul. That's another lie that you all have been putting out. We did not take Medicaid away from a single soul. We said that 1,000,000 times when we passed the Working Families Tax Cuts Act. We never took one person off of Medicaid. What we've done over and over and over again is to attempt to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. I hope when you say we have a broken healthcare system, you're including in that, Mr. Jeffries, that we have waste, fraud, and abuse.
Am I to believe that the one big ugly
We
bill
have waste,
loved and
fraud-
cherished Medicaid?
We have waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, we look forward to continuing that support when the shutdown's over and the American people aren't being held hostage. We've said that 1,000,000 times since you all shut down the government. We've said that. Let us get through the appropriations process. We had we had November and December to work on this after we got through the appropriations process. But no, that wasn't good enough for you all. And I wish we were in control. I truly wish we were in control.
Who's in
I will
control?
tell you, we have a majority of one in the House, and you know, and I know, that it takes 60 votes in the Senate. We have 53 Republicans.
Is that
in the
majority of
Senate.
one Donald Trump?
Democrats refuse to infuse a lick of accountability into the subsidies that they legislated. And again, you decided to sunset that. Per the CBO, in 2025, when we talked about Kaiser family, now we're talking about CBO. In 2025 alone, 2.3 million ineligible individuals received these temporary credits, a broken healthcare system. The Biden administration took a hatchet to eligibility safeguards, weakened eligibility verification, reduced tax reporting, and allowed insurance brokers to game the system by switching enrollees' plans monthly. This led to phantom enrollees, millions of people who never actually received health care. For context, $35 billion was spent on approximately 4.6 million phantom enrollees in 2024 who never received health care. That's been alluded to here earlier. I think that the last thing we should be doing is rubber stamping this giveaway to insurance companies. The biggest subsidies in this country right now are given to insurance companies for people who aren't getting health care. We do want to fix the health care system in this country. We need to fix the waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid, waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare, waste, fraud, and abuse in the Unaffordable Care Act. We want to work on it. Let's get the government back. Let's work on appropriations, and let's let the appropriate committees be working on health care. Let's not muddy the water. This has been an obfuscation exercise tonight by saying over and over, we got to do health care. Mr. Cole said over and over, it's not an appropriations process. It's other committees. So you all are trying to take away the American people's attention from what we're here to do tonight. And we've spent a lot of time on it.
Madam Chair?
With that, I yield myself back. And
I mean, have you heard from anybody in your district who has seen their health premiums double or triple? I mean, and what do you tell these people?
I heard
You're
that.
on your own, tough luck, and, you know?
Mr. McGovern, I'll answer.
Okay.
No, I have not. But I heard when Obamacare was put in effect how horrible Obamacare was. Mr. McGovern, I'm answering your question. I heard how awful Obamacare was when it went into effect. I hear from people all the time, not just now, but for the last several years, how their insurance premiums have gone up over and over again. So,
Do you know the approval rating of the Affordable Care Act is like 65%, and Donald Trump's approval rating is at 37%? I'm happy to go down to your district. We can do a joint town hall together and listen to people tell us their healthcare stories. But I can't go back to my
thank you,
constituents and
Mr.
just tell them,
McGovern.
screw you, you're on
It's
your own.
my-
We're not going to help you out.
Mr. McGovern, it's my
yield back.
time. And I yield back. And I thank our witnesses for being here. You're excused.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Ms. Wasserman Schultz, Ms. Dexter, Ms. Randall, Ms. Bonamici, Ms. Ansari, and Mr. Subramanian.